Well, good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our French Chamber of Commerce Business Days. And I hope you've had the opportunity to catch some of our other sessions this week. My name is Alison Woolsey, and I am currently a councillor of the New South Wales chapter of the French Chamber of Commerce and previously one of its federal board directors. I'm also the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at Clayton Utz, one of Australia's leading law firms. Before I begin today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which Gabrielle and I are meeting today, which is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. And I'd also like to extend an acknowledgement to all traditional owners of our viewers' lands throughout Australia. Shaping attractive cities, the theme of our business forum, is inherently an interesting topic. But 2020 has really reframed the discussion. It's my great privilege today to interview Gabriel Metcalf, CEO of the Committee for Sydney. And we're actually really fortunate to be able to do this interview in person, Gabriel.
Yeah, so, it's very nice.
No perspex, no nothing. So a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to delve into, during the Fact You Business Days, we're delving into a variety of specific areas around shaping an attractive city, be it infrastructure, sustainability and so forth. But Gabrielle, you are well placed, I believe, to offer some broad observations through the lens of your role around shaping attractive cities. So perhaps to start with, could you tell us a little bit about your background, so a little bit about the Committee for Sydney and also its framework for action, particularly pre-COVID-19?
Yeah, great. Well, I am an American in Sydney. I've been here for about 2 years running the Committee for Sydney. The committee is a broad, independent research and advocacy group. So we try to figure out solutions for problems of all kind that are facing Sydney. And then we bring those ideas to government. Mm-hmm. Before this, I was in a similar role in San Francisco, and I did that for 20 years. And this all started for me about 5 years ago. I brought my board of directors to Sydney on a study tour, and I guess we all fell in love with the place. So when the phone rang about this role, I answered, and have been very privileged to be here learning about Sydney these last couple of years, and have ended up spending this insane year in Australia instead of America, which is my great fortune, because Australia has done such a good job so far, and I know we don't want to jinx it because that can change at any time, but so far so good. So yeah, the committee has a broad remit, and so we know a little bit about a lot of different topics. And it's true that COVID has really refocused us quite profoundly. Some of the issues we have worked on for many years, like building more public transport, still show up, but now the question is, how do we get people back on public transport during the pandemic? Or what are the best uses of infrastructure as fiscal stimulus to support recovery from the recession? So sometimes it's the same issues, but through a new lens. Probably like everybody, we're highly focused on managing through COVID, but also laying the groundwork for recovery, for full social and economic recovery.
So you see this year as being an opportunity to actually really innovate and start doing things differently?
Well, I think that's been quite surprising. For those of us who are lucky enough to be able to work from home, and those of us who are lucky enough to still have our jobs, I think we've discovered some quite wonderful things about this. We've discovered, almost everybody says working from home has turned out to be pretty seamless. And I think that's absolutely going to accelerate what was a trend already of more flexibility in working arrangements. But I think that's essentially universal, that that every organization in the world is saying they're going to do more of that in the future. I'm sure there are exceptions, but I haven't met them yet. Yeah, and it's probably going to accelerate in some countries, some other changes. This phrase, this slogan, "Build Back Better," in a lot of countries, they're using the opportunity to rethink their approach to climate change. Unfortunately, not yet Australia, but we're working on that. So yeah, there really are opportunities for Australia in particular. The global reputation for being a safe country, a well-governed country, a place that listens to science and where people are willing to make sacrifices to take care of one another. I think that positions Australia very well moving forward.
Yeah. And I appreciate governance was one of your priorities pre-COVID. Yeah. So that's an example of one that's perhaps shifting ever so slightly, and another might be planning.
Yeah, well, so many things have shifted. I mean, the big debate right before COVID hit was how could Sydney cope with the pressures of so much growth?
Yes.
And could the infrastructure keep up with the growth? Could the home building keep up with all the people moving here? And we were struggling with those pressures, which are really problems of success. So no one can get here now. There is not going to be any immigration for at least a year and possibly longer. So if nothing else, it's a breather to catch up. I don't think we know what it looks like on the other side, but yeah, we're dealing with a collapse of demand for housing, sort of the opposite problem right now. So yes, that's just one of many examples in how planning has changed.
And some of the ideas that I've been reading about that you're looking at to stimulate the city going forward are things like how do you make it easier for new companies to start, or how do you make it easy for talented people to come and stay in Sydney? Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Australia has a long-standing reliance on the digging things out of the ground for its exports. And it's been clear that is not, in the long run, going to be as big of a source of export income. As the rest of the world decarbonizes and stops burning coal, they're not going to be buying Australia's coal anymore. And so there is a long-term, very grave threat to Australia's economy. So we've been trying to hold a conversation about what are the options. Mm-hmm. And essentially, Australia has to develop new export industries. Now, COVID and the recession really impact that. Because economies change in recessions. They don't come back the way they were. Some industries never get back to their former strength. Australia, in a sense, is out of practice with that because it skipped the recession after the GFC, mm-hmm. just through good financial management, really, fiscal management. But that's what happens in recessions. Some industries never come back to their former strength. So the only way you get back to full employment is if new industries emerge. So that is going to require having the right policy settings so that it's really easy to start and grow new companies.
It's an interesting point, and I think I also read you're looking at how we can give people an opportunity to educate, to upskill in this new world. And there was an interesting idea in one of your papers around this concept of leveraging long service leave and converting the value of that to an education type fund, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, it's a bit of a technical proposal, but yeah, trying to think of ways to make it really easy for people to keep learning new skills throughout the course of their careers.
Interesting. I might drill down now to particularly the CBD. You know, how do we revive it, Gabrielle? I mean, we've got Melbourne that perhaps is worse off than Sydney, but how do we revive Sydney against this backdrop?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. I mean, what remote working or working from home means is that a lot of the outer suburbs are thriving right now. Their local high streets are doing really well. But the CBD of Sydney, like most CBDs around the world, is a shadow of its former self. It just doesn't have the people here to support the restaurants and cafes and bars and anything else. So you could say, well, it's fine. The same economic activity has just shifted elsewhere, which is partly true. However, CBDs are important. They are the place where you go to meet with people outside of your organization, to bump into people you didn't expect to bump into. And sort of by definition, a CBD is the part of a city where most people can get there the most easily. So it's the platform for people to come together.
Yeah.
If everybody disperses and the CBDs die or convert to residential neighborhoods, we're going to lose a lot economically. We're going to lose a lot in terms of innovation. We're also going to lose a lot in terms of culture, because generally the major cultural institutions are in the center, as well as the employment, and those are in a synergistic relationship with one another. So we have to figure out how to revive the CBD. While COVID is still in circulation, there is only so much we can do. But I would say that the central idea is we need to make the CBD as fun and attractive as possible, so that people will want to come in rather than just being forced to. Yeah. A program of cultural activation where performing arts groups and visual arts groups of all kinds can provide cultural offerings, making it really easy to have outdoor dining, which you see in cities like New York to great effect. Building a network of rapid or so-called pop-up cycleways to offer another way for people to get in. One thing we believe would really help is a requirement to wear masks on public transport. All over the world, I think the evidence is now clear that it is safe to be on public transport if everyone's wearing masks. And so you could really get the numbers back up that way. So those are some of the things we can do.
Is there an urgency about it? Do we need to move fast on this?
Well, I think we do, because what we want to avoid is a negative cycle where there's widespread failure of the businesses, the restaurants and the bars and the cafes and the stores. If those fail, then there's even less reason to be in the CBD, and you could really end up in a negative cycle.
Yes.
So we want to avoid that. We want to make sure that all of those small businesses that give the vitality and the excitement are still there for us. So that means we have to support them.
I think given the likely European representation in our audience for today, have you got any observations or indeed lessons learnt from some of the great cities over in Europe? And indeed, given your background from San Francisco, and it's a very popular destination for Australians, any lessons to be learnt from those cities, either pre-COVID or now?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And yes, I mean, one of the things that is so wonderful about Sydney is how globally oriented it is, so how outward focused. And this is a place that likes to learn from other cities. So yeah, I've been really impressed by New York and London and Paris with their commitment to remake their cities to enable cycling to become a mainstream mode of transport. Those are three cities that didn't used to be cycling cities, and they have changed. That's been a 20-year process. They've used COVID as a chance to really accelerate it. And so lots of people in suits going all over on bikes.
And do they have a 30-kilometre-an-hour speed limit as well, or?
Well, there's been a move all over the world, which to lower speed limits to the point where if a car hits you, you live. That's the essential idea. So that'd be about 30 kilometers per hour. When the traffic goes that speed, everything calms down. Bikes can mix safely with cars. So yes, those are three cities, but so are lots of others that are implementing generally speed limits in that range. Wherever there's going to be a lot of people on foot, it'd be a great thing for Sydney to do. San Francisco's been very creative about remaking its public transport system during COVID. San Francisco is one of the cities in America that's handled COVID quite well. Has a very strong public health system. That's all decentralized in America. So every county, people here don't even know what a county is, but anyway, it's a unit between the city and the states. Every county runs its own public health system, essentially. So San Francisco's done a good job, but they've remade the public transport system to work for the new conditions, where they've basically set up a bunch of lines where they don't let the cars in, and it's buses only, and so they move really quickly, and it's been an interesting, rapid response to COVID. I think Sydney looks a lot like some of the Asian technocracies, like Seoul or Singapore, in terms of its highly competent public health response to the pandemic. So that's a nice club to be in.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the outdoor dining, for example, and how we need to take more advantage of that, particularly, I guess, as we head into summer. And I guess there's lessons learned from overseas in that respect. And also art galleries, opening. We're quite used to a fairly short day, aren't we, for art galleries, whereas in fact this idea of opening them later, which we see elsewhere, could pull people back.
Yeah, I mean, in places like New York, it was illegal to for restaurants to serve people indoors. And it was conversely encouraged to serve people out of doors. So thousands of restaurants took over the streets, and it's quite wonderful. And there are not super spreader events outside. You're just so much safer when you're outside. So Sydney should really do that. And I think New York can be quite inspiring for that.
Is there I know they talk about the livability of cities and how livable is Sydney vis-a-vis some of the other great cities of the world?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, Sydney is one of the top most livable cities in the whole world. And it's fabulous. We're so lucky.
Yeah, terrific. I'm going to ask you a question that's a little bit of fun. And it's about a show. It's a show on Netflix. It's one of the biggest shows at the moment, and it's called Emily in Paris. And it's about an American, a young executive marketing woman who travels off to Paris. And love it or hate it, the star of the show is the city of Paris. And I guess my question for you, Gabrielle, is could we envisage a similarly successful show entitled Emily in Sydney?
Yes, it's such a good idea to make that show. She could live in Surrey Hills and walk to work very easily and go out to fabulous restaurants after work each night. She could jet over to Coogee on the weekends, and Emily in Sydney would feature a lot more beach scenes than Emily in Paris, but an equally wonderful experience of city life.
I like it. We'll need to put you in touch with the producers.
Yes, I can advise on Americans moving to Sydney.
Look, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up shortly, but have you got one final message for our viewers about shaping attractive cities? What can they go out and do tomorrow, for example, to progress your cause?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm getting asked a lot these days, is COVID going to lead to an abandonment of cities, as happened in the 1970s to so many cities in the world where people wanted to move to the suburbs, and the property values in the inner cities were declining in many cases, and there were even abandoned buildings. And no, that's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. All of the reasons people loved being in cities before will still be true. So I think we can be confident in the long-term magnetic attractiveness of city life. We are going through a tough period of time now, and we, as of today, we do not know how long it's going to last. So look, my one piece of advice to Sydney-siders is wear your masks on public transport.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure, Gabrielle. We've barely scratched the surface, but you've certainly made me think, you've made us think about the topic and given us plenty to digest. And thank you so much for advancing the discussion on Sydney, and I think it's in very good hands with your leadership on the topic.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you also to my colleagues at the French Australian Chamber of Commerce, who've done a marvellous job in setting up our business days this week, and also to the French Embassy, Austrade, and our sponsors who have been supportive throughout. And finally, a big thank you to those of you watching. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you enjoy the rest of our Business Days week. Thank you again.